All right, so today we're jumping into a really interesting book called Being Spiritually Minded and Earthly Wise. And it gets right to the heart of a struggle that, let's be real, so many of us face every single day.
So here's the big question, right? How in the world do you balance your highest ideals, your spiritual side, with the nitty-gritty of daily life? You know, the job, the bills, just trying to get ahead. The book calls this a huge internal conflict, and I think we can all relate to that.
The book kicks things off by naming this feeling. It calls it the great tension. It's this idea that if you're a person of faith, you're basically living with one foot in two different worlds, and they're constantly pulling you in opposite directions.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. You've got things above, seeking God's kingdom, focusing on what's eternal. And then bam, you've got things on earth, building a career, trying to be successful, paying the mortgage. The author says this isn't just a small thing. It's a tension that can stretch you to your absolute breaking point. The book really grounds this whole idea in Scripture, pointing to verses like this one from Colossians, set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. And you can see how that creates the problem, right? How are you supposed to do that when the world around you is screaming for you to focus on everything but that?
Okay, so with all this tension, what happens when we mess up, when we make a bad call? Well, according to the book, that's when a really dangerous temptation can creep in, the temptation to dodge responsibility for what we've done.
And to make this point, the author brings up that classic principle of sowing and reaping. You'll find it here in Galatians. The idea is super simple but profound. What you put in is what you get out. Your choices have consequences. It's like a law of nature, and it applies to everything. Your job, your money, your relationships. Every single choice leads somewhere.
Now, this leads to a really critical warning in the book. It says we have to avoid the trap of spiritualizing our mistakes. What does that mean? It means blaming God or destiny for something that went wrong when, if we're being honest, it was because of a bad decision we made. Or maybe we were just lazy or didn't prepare properly.
And here's the cycle it warns us about. It's a four-step trap. You make a poor choice, you get a bad result. But instead of owning it, you jump to step 3 and avoid responsibility. And how do you do that? Step 4, you spiritualize it. You say, oh, it must be God's will, when really it was just a predictable outcome. The book argues that this way of thinking completely short-circuits any chance of learning or growing.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's a pretty big one. So what's the answer? This is where the whole book pivots. The solution, it says, is something called the call to be wise.
And this verse from Matthew is held up as the master key. Check this out. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. At first, that might sound like a contradiction, right? But the author says, no, it's a command to have both. Be a good person, full of integrity. That's the harmless as doves part. But at the same time, you've got to be smart, savvy, and practical about how you navigate the real world. That's being wise as serpents.
So what is this wisdom we're talking about? The book makes it super clear this isn't some pie-in-the-sky philosophy. It's practical wisdom. It's defined as knowing what to do, how to do it, and when to do the right thing for a given situation. It's street smarts for life, basically.
All right, that sounds good in theory, but where does the rubber meet the road? Well, the next part of the book is all about putting that wisdom into action in our actual lives.
And here are some of the areas it points to. A good marriage? It takes more than just love. It takes real skill. Handling your finances. It's not just about giving. It's about smart budgeting. And pursuing your calling? Inspiration is great, but it's useless without preparation and flat-out hard work. The big idea here is that faith doesn't replace practical effort. It's supposed to work with it. This line from the book just says it all. It warns us not to become so spiritual that we are of no earthly use. Ouch, that's a powerful gut check, isn't it? The goal isn't to be so heavenly minded that you're useless on earth. It's about having a faith that's grounded, that actually works, and that makes a real difference right here, right now.
Now, all this talk about wisdom and responsibility brings up a huge question. I mean, what happens when we inevitably fail? Because we will. The book doesn't shy away from this. The final section tackles it head-on with a concept called a redeeming grace.
Let's be real for a second. Even if you try your absolute best to be wise, you're still going to mess up. You're human. So what happens then? Is it game over?
The book brings in verses like this one from Psalms to give us a different perspective. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down. The point is, failure isn't final. Making a mistake doesn't mean you're done for. There's this idea of divine support, a hand that helps you get back on your feet.
And this all builds to the book's ultimate message of hope, which is this: God is bigger than your mistakes. Sure, a bad choice might cause a delay, it might cause some pain, it might send you on a detour you didn't plan for,
but it doesn't have the final say. It doesn't have to wreck your whole journey, especially if you're willing to learn from it.
And the book ends on this incredible idea of restoration, using this image from Joel about restoring the years that the swarming locust has eaten. Think about that. The locusts represent all that lost time, the opportunities we blew, the fallout from our bad choices. The promise here is that even that can be redeemed, that there's hope for renewal, even after major setbacks.
So, when you boil it all down, the whole book leaves us with this one massive question to chew on. Do you see faith as a substitute for wisdom? You know, a get-out-of-jail-free card from having to be smart and prepared? Or is faith the very foundation that all our practical earthly wisdom is supposed to be built on? That's definitely something worth thinking about.